The story begins on a chilly morning at JFK International Airport in New York. The bustling terminal is alive with the sounds of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and announcements echoing over the intercom. Among the crowd is Sarah Johnson, a confident and accomplished woman in her early 30s. Dressed in a sleek navy blue blazer, tailored trousers, and polished heels, she stands out as someone who exudes professionalism and poise. Sarah is no stranger to first-class travel. Her demanding job as a senior executive at a leading tech company often requires her to fly internationally for meetings and conferences. Today, Sarah is headed to London for an important presentation that could shape the future of her company. As she makes her way through security and into the exclusive first-class lounge, she's greeted by the familiar comforts of luxury: plush seating, gourmet snacks, and a serene atmosphere far removed from the chaos outside. She finds a quiet corner, sipping on a cappuccino while reviewing notes on her tablet. Despite the excitement of the trip, Sarah can't shake off a faint sense of unease, an instinctive feeling that something unusual lies ahead. Meanwhile, Captain E. Mark Thompson, a seasoned pilot in his mid-40s, strides confidently toward the gate. With his perfectly pressed uniform, gold insignias gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and a swagger that screams authority, Mark commands attention wherever he goes. He's been flying for over 2 decades and takes immense pride in his career. However, years of commanding cockpits have also inflated his ego, making him arrogant and dismissive of those he deems beneath him. To Mark, being a pilot isn't just a profession, it's a status symbol, one he believes places him above ordinary passengers. As boarding begins, Sarah steps onto the plane, her presence immediately noticed by the flight attendants, who greet her warmly. She settles into her seat near the front of the cabin, placing her carry-on bag neatly in the overhead compartment. Moments later, Mark enters the aircraft, his eyes scanning the first-class section with a mix of curiosity and judgment. When he spots Sarah, his expression shifts slightly, his gaze lingering just a fraction too long before he takes his seat diagonally across the aisle from her. From the moment he sits down, Mark's demeanor becomes increasingly condescending. At first it's subtle, a raised eyebrow when Sarah orders a glass of red wine, or a scoff when she pulls out a leather-bound notebook to jot down ideas. But soon, his behavior escalates. Leaning back in his chair, Mark starts making snide remarks loud enough for those around him to hear. "First class sure gets interesting these days," he mutters sarcastically, glancing pointedly at Sarah. A few passengers glance awkwardly between them, unsure how to react. Sarah, aware of his comments but determined not to let them ruin her day, keeps her focus on her work. She knows encounters like this aren't uncommon. She's faced prejudice before because of her race, gender, or both. Yet, each time, she's chosen to rise above it, refusing to let ignorance dim her shine. Still, there's a part of her that feels frustrated, knowing that people like Mark exist in positions of power, using their influence to belittle others without consequence. Mark, however, isn't done yet. Emboldened by the lack of pushback, he decides to take things further. Turning to a nearby passenger, a middle-aged man scrolling through emails on his phone, Mark says loudly, "You know, I'm all for diversity and inclusion, but some folks really need to earn their spot here." Though he doesn't explicitly name Sarah, the implication is clear. His words hang heavy in the air, drawing disapproving looks from several passengers, including the flight attendant serving drinks. Despite the tension, Sarah remains calm, her face betraying no emotion. Inside, though, her mind races. Should she confront him? Ignore him completely? Or find a way to turn the situation around? After a moment's pause, she chooses the latter. Setting aside her notebook, Sarah turns toward Mark with a polite smile. "Excuse me," she says softly but firmly. "I couldn't help overhearing your comment. Are you referring to me?" Caught off guard, Mark hesitates for a split second, before recovering his bravado. "Well, if the shoe fits..." He trails off, smirking as if daring her to challenge him. But Sarah doesn't rise to the bait, at least not in the way he expects. Instead, She extends her hand gracefully. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Johnson, Senior Vice President of Innovation at Technova Solutions. And you are? Her question catches Mark off guard once again. Flustered, he mumbles his name and title, clearly unprepared for such a composed response. Sensing an opportunity to shift the dynamic, Sarah continues. It's fascinating how aviation has evolved over the years. I've had the privilege of working closely with airlines to develop advanced navigation systems. Perhaps we have more in common than you realize. For the first time since boarding, Mark finds himself speechless. He'd assumed Sarah was just another passenger lucky enough to snag a first-class ticket, but now he realizes she might actually be smarter and more accomplished than he could ever hope to be. Determined to regain control of the situation, he attempts to steer the conversation back to his own achievements, boasting about his decades of experience and countless hours spent in the cockpit. But Sarah isn't interested in indulging his ego. With quiet confidence, she interjects, sharing insights about recent innovations in aviation technology. She explains how artificial intelligence and machine learning are revolutionizing flight safety and efficiency, citing specific examples from her work. Passengers nearby begin tuning in, intrigued by her expertise. Even the flight attendant pauses, mid-service, to listen, nodding appreciatively as Sarah speaks. By the time she finishes, the mood in the cabin has shifted dramatically. What started as a tense standoff has transformed into a captivating discussion, with Sarah effortlessly commanding the room's attention. Mark, on the other hand, sits stiffly in his seat, his earlier arrogance replaced by thinly veiled irritation. For the remainder of the flight, he retreats into silence, glaring at the window as if hoping the ground would swallow him whole. Unbeknownst to Mark, this confrontation is only the beginning. Little does he know that Sarah's influence extends far beyond the confines of this airplane, and that his actions today will have consequences far greater than he could imagine. As the plane ascends into the clouds, Sarah leans back in her seat, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. She knows she's proven her point, not just to Mark, but to everyone watching. And deep down, she senses that the real drama is yet to unfold. As the plane cruises at 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the tension in first class lingers like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Mark Thompson, still simmering with frustration after being outshone by Sarah Johnson, struggles to regain his composure. Sitting rigidly in his seat, he stares out the window, pretending to admire the endless expanse of clouds below. But inside, his mind is racing. How could this woman, a stranger he initially dismissed as unremarkable, have dismantled his carefully constructed persona so effortlessly? His pride feels bruised, and worse yet, he knows other passengers are now watching him with judgmental eyes. Sarah, on the other hand, remains calm and collected. She's returned to her work, typing away on her laptop while occasionally glancing up to exchange polite smiles with fellow travelers. Her demeanor is professional but warm, a stark contrast to Mark's defensive posture. Despite his earlier insults, she refuses to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channels her energy into preparing for her upcoming presentation, knowing that staying focused will serve her better than dwelling on negativity. The atmosphere in the cabin shifts slightly when dinner service begins. The flight attendants glide through the aisles, offering gourmet meals plated with precision. Sarah opts for grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, savoring each bite as she continues reviewing documents on her tablet. Mark, however, barely touches his food. When the flight attendant asks if everything is okay, he snaps irritably, "It's fine," before pushing the tray aside. His tone draws disapproving looks from nearby passengers, further isolating him. Unable to ignore the growing unease within himself, Mark decides to make one last attempt to assert dominance. Leaning forward slightly, he clears his throat loudly to grab everyone's attention. "You know," he begins, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure others hear him, "flying isn't just about fancy gadgets or software systems. It's about instinct, experience, and making split-second decisions that save lives." He pauses dramatically, glancing pointedly at Sarah, something no computer can replicate. The cabin falls silent for a moment, all eyes turning toward Sarah. For a brief second, it seems as though Mark might have succeeded in reclaiming some ground. But Sarah doesn't flinch. Without looking up from her laptop, she responds coolly. That's true, to an extent. Experience is invaluable, especially in high-pressure situations. However, relying solely on instinct without embracing modern tools can lead to preventable errors. In fact, studies show that integrating AI-driven analytics reduces human error by nearly 40% in critical scenarios. Her words land like a punch, leaving Mark momentarily speechless. Passengers nod in agreement, murmuring amongst themselves about how logical and well-researched her points sound. One woman seated across the aisle leans over and asks Sarah, "Do you think these advancements will change pilot training programs?" Sarah nods thoughtfully, explaining how simulation technologies and predictive algorithms are already transforming aviation education. As she speaks, even the flight attendants pause to listen, clearly impressed by her knowledge. Mark watches helplessly as Sarah captivates the audience once again. Feeling cornered, he tries to interrupt, raising his voice slightly. But what happens when technology fails? Pilots are trained to handle emergencies manually, something machines simply can't do. His argument sounds desperate, almost pleading, and several passengers exchange skeptical glances. Sensing his vulnerability, Sarah counters gently but firmly. Of course, manual skills are essential. My team actually works closely with pilots to enhance those very capabilities. Technology doesn't replace humans, it supports them, ensuring they're better equipped to handle crises. Humility is key here. Recognizing our limitations allows us to grow stronger together. The word humility hangs in the air like a dagger aimed directly at Mark's inflated ego. His face flushes, red, and he clenches his fist tightly under the table. Knowing he's losing the battle, he blurts out, "Well, maybe you should stick to your computers and leave the flying to professionals." The remark earns scattered chuckles from a few passengers, but most remain silent, their expressions unreadable. One man sitting beside Sarah, a middle-aged businessman named Richard, finally speaks up. Turning to Mark, he says evenly, "I don't know much about tech, but I do know arrogance when I see it. You've been lecturing this entire flight, yet every time someone challenges you, you get defensive. Maybe instead of talking so much, you should try listening." His words resonate deeply, prompting nods of approval from others around them. Realizing he's completely alienated himself, Mark slumps back into his seat, defeated. For the rest of the meal, he avoids eye contact with anyone, scowling silently as conversations swirl around him. Meanwhile, Sarah graciously thanks Richard for his support, sparking a lively discussion about innovation and leadership among the passengers. By the time dessert is served, the mood in first class has shifted entirely. Where there was once tension, camaraderie now reigns, and Sarah is at the center of it all. Later that evening, as the lights dim and most passengers settle in for sleep, Sarah reflects on the events of the day. Though she never intended to provoke a confrontation, she understands why moments like these matter. Every act of standing up against prejudice, even small ones, contributes to a larger cultural shift. She thinks about the young black women who may someday find themselves in similar situations, hoping her example will inspire them to speak up confidently. Unbeknownst to Sarah, however, Mark hasn't given up quite yet. Retreating to the cockpit during a routine check-in, he vents his frustrations to the co-pilot, exaggerating details to paint himself as the victim. "She ambushed me in front of everyone," he complains bitterly. "Acting like she knows more about flying than I do. Can you believe that?" The co-pilot listens patiently, nodding occasionally but maintaining a neutral expression. Finally, he interjects, "Look, Mark, I get that you were embarrassed, but maybe you went too far. People don't forget stuff like this. If word gets out, it could reflect badly on the airline and on you personally." Mark waves off the warning, insisting that Sarah is the real problem. "She's probably just trying to make a name for herself," he mutters dismissively. Back in the cabin, Sarah notices the subtle changes in passenger behavior. Several individuals approach her to thank her for speaking so eloquently and sharing valuable insights. One older gentleman even jokes, If I had known we'd be getting a free lesson on aviation tech, I'd have booked this flight sooner. Laughter ripples through the group, easing any lingering discomfort from earlier. As the hours pass, the plane continues its steady journey across the ocean. Outside, the sky stretches endlessly, dotted with stars that twinkle faintly against the darkness. Inside, however, the emotional landscape has transformed. What began as a tense standoff has evolved into a powerful reminder of resilience and grace under pressure. And though Mark remains oblivious to the impact of his actions, Sarah knows that accountability often arrives unexpectedly. And when it does, it demands honesty and reflection. By the time the seatbelt sign illuminates, signaling the descent into London Heathrow Airport, the dynamics among the passengers have shifted irrevocably. While some eagerly anticipate landing, others, like Sarah, are left contemplating the broader implications of the day's events. For her, this encounter wasn't just about proving a point. It was about fostering understanding and breaking down barriers, one conversation at a time. As the plane descends through the clouds, Sarah gazes out the window, her reflection mirrored faintly in the glass. She thinks about the challenges ahead, not just professionally, but personally. Moments like these remind her why representation matters and why using her platform responsibly is crucial. She smiles softly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever comes next, she's ready to face it head-on, with courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination. Little does she realize, however, that Mark's reckoning is closer than either of them anticipates. The ripple effects of his behavior will soon extend far beyond the confines of this flight, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself. And for Sarah, the story is only beginning, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of adversity, no matter how daunting the odds may seem. The plane touches down at London Heathrow Airport with a gentle thud, signaling the end of the long transatlantic journey. As the engines wind down and passengers begin unbuckling their seatbelts, the cabin buzzes with the usual post-flight energy, people gathering their belongings, stretching cramped limbs and preparing to disembark. For Sarah Johnson, however, the landing feels like more than just the conclusion of a flight. It marks the beginning of a new chapter, one where her actions on board may have far-reaching consequences she hadn't anticipated. Sarah takes a moment to gather her things, organizing her laptop, notebook, and documents neatly into her carry-on bag. She moves deliberately, aware that others are watching her. Throughout the flight, she had earned not only respect, but admiration from many of her fellow travelers. A few even linger by her seat, thanking her for her insights or simply expressing how inspiring they found her composure during the tense exchange with Mark Thompson. One woman, a young professional named Clara, shyly approaches Sarah and says, "I just wanted to say thank you. Seeing you handle that situation so gracefully meant a lot to me." Sarah smiles warmly, replying, "We all deserve to be treated with dignity. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." Meanwhile, Mark sits rigidly in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His earlier bravado has completely evaporated, replaced by a simmering mix of anger and humiliation. As passengers file past him toward the exit, he overhears snippets of conversations, most of which aren't flattering. "Did you see how rude that pilot was?" mutters one man to his companion. Another passenger shakes her head disapprovingly, saying, "He really needs to check his ego." Each comment stings, chipping away at what little remained of Mark's pride. When the aisle finally clears enough for him to move, Mark grabs his bag and heads toward the cockpit without looking back. Once inside, he slams his suitcase onto the floor, startling the co-pilot, who raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Mark paces anxiously, muttering under his breath about entitled passengers and unfair treatment. The co-pilot, sensing the growing tension, tries to intervene. "Mark, maybe take a step back and think about this objectively," he suggests cautiously. "You came across as pretty aggressive earlier. People don't forget stuff like that." But Mark isn't ready to listen. "Objective? You want me to be objective when she practically ambushed me in front of everyone?" he snaps, his voice rising. She made me look like some kind of fool. The co-pilot sighs, realizing there's no reasoning with him right now. Instead, he offers a final piece of advice. Just try to stay calm once we're off the plane. If anyone reports this, it could get messy. Trust me, you don't want HR involved. Unbeknownst to Mark, reports are already being filed. Back. In the terminal, Sarah is greeted by colleagues awaiting her arrival. Among them is James Carter, the CEO of the airline operating the flight. Tall, distinguished, and impeccably dressed, James exudes authority as he shakes Sarah's hand warmly. "Welcome to London, Sarah," he says with a genuine smile. "I trust your flight was comfortable." Sarah hesitates for a fraction of a second before responding diplomatically. "Mostly yes, though I did encounter an unpleasant incident involving one of your pilots." Her tone is measured, neither accusatory nor overly casual. Intrigued, James asks her to elaborate, assuring her that any issues will be taken seriously. Sensing his sincerity, Sarah recounts the events of the flight, describing Mark's dismissive remarks, his attempts to belittle her, and the eventual public confrontation. James listens intently, his expression darkening as Sarah speaks. When she finishes, he nods gravely. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Sarah. Rest assured we'll investigate thoroughly. Behavior like that has no place in our company, or anywhere else for that matter." Satisfied with his response, Sarah thanks him and follows her team out of the terminal, leaving James to process what he's heard. In the hours following the flight's arrival, news of the altercation spreads rapidly, not just within the airline, but beyond it. Several passengers, frustrated by Mark's behavior, decide to share their experiences online. Videos recorded discreetly on smartphones begin surfacing on social media platforms, capturing key moments of the confrontation. In one clip, Mark can clearly be heard mocking Sarah's presence in first class. In another, Sarah delivers her rebuttal with poise and intelligence, leaving viewers impressed by her grace under pressure. The posts quickly gain traction, sparking heated debates about privilege, prejudice, and professionalism in high-stakes industries like aviation. Comments flood in from people around the world, many praising Sarah for standing up to Mark while condemning his arrogance and bias. Hashtags like "Mark's arrogant pilot exposed" and "Knee turn stand with Sarah" trend globally, drawing attention not only to the incident itself, but also to broader discussions about systemic discrimination in corporate environments. For Sarah, the viral attention comes as both a surprise and a validation of sorts. While she never sought to become the center of controversy, she recognizes the importance of using her platform to amplify marginalized voices. Overwhelmed by messages of support, she pens a thoughtful statement on LinkedIn, addressing the backlash against Mark while emphasizing the need for accountability and growth. "No one should face prejudice because of who they are," she writes. "But equally important is recognizing that change begins with reflection. Let's use this moment to foster understanding rather than division." Her words resonate deeply, earning thousands of likes and shares. Industry leaders, activists, and everyday individuals commend her for handling the situation with maturity and empathy. Some even reach out privately to share their own stories of facing discrimination, thanking her for paving the way forward. Back at the airline headquarters, James Carter convenes an emergency meeting with senior executives to address the fallout. The PR department scrambles to draft a statement acknowledging the incident, while assuring customers that appropriate action will be taken. Meanwhile, investigators review passenger complaints, video evidence, and statements from cabin crew members, who witnessed the altercation firsthand. It doesn't take long for them to conclude that Mark's behavior violated multiple company policies, including those related to harassment and unprofessional conduct. Summoned to a disciplinary hearing, Mark arrives visibly agitated, still clinging to the belief that he's been unfairly targeted. During the proceedings, he attempts to justify his actions, claiming that Sarah provoked him and exaggerating details to cast himself as the victim. However, the overwhelming evidence paints a damning picture, one that leaves little room for leniency. After hours of deliberation, the panel unanimously agrees to terminate Mark's employment with immediate effect. Additionally, his pilot's license is suspended pending further review by regulatory authorities. News of Mark's dismissal sends shockwaves through the aviation community. Some defend him, arguing that a single incident shouldn't define a decades-long career. Others view his punishment as long overdue, citing previous instances of misconduct that went unchecked. Regardless of differing opinions, one thing becomes clear. Mark's downfall serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked arrogance and the consequences of failing to treat others with basic decency. As days turn into weeks, the ripple effects of the incident continue to unfold. Airlines worldwide begin revisiting their training programs, emphasizing inclusivity, cultural sensitivity, and conflict resolution. Flight attendants and ground staff undergo workshops designed to equip them with tools to handle similar situations effectively. Social media campaigns encourage passengers to report discriminatory behavior, empowering victims to speak out without fear of retaliation. For Sarah, the experience inspires her to take action beyond words. Recognizing the unique challenges faced by women of color in STEM fields, she launches a mentorship initiative aimed at fostering diversity and inclusion. Named Skybound Futures, the program connects aspiring professionals with industry leaders who provide guidance, resources, and opportunities for growth. Within months, hundreds of applicants from across the globe join the initiative, eager to learn from someone who embodies resilience and excellence. Despite the negativity surrounding Mark's actions, Sarah chooses to focus on the positive impact she can create moving forward. She views the incident not as a personal victory over him, but as a catalyst for meaningful change. A chance to break down barriers and inspire others to dream bigger. And though she occasionally reflects on the confrontation, she does so with a sense of purpose, knowing that every challenge presents an opportunity to grow stronger. Little does Sarah realize, however, that her story is far from over. The lessons learned aboard that flight will continue shaping her journey in unexpected ways, reminding her and those around her that true strength lies not in tearing others down but in lifting oneself and others up. Weeks after the fateful flight, life for Sarah Johnson and Mark Thompson takes two drastically different paths. For Sarah, the aftermath of the incident becomes a turning point, not just in her career, but in how she views her role as a leader and advocate. The viral attention surrounding her confrontation with Mark has thrust her into the spotlight, earning her recognition not only as a tech innovator, but also as a symbol of resilience and grace under pressure. Invitations pour in from conferences, podcasts, and media outlets eager to hear her perspective on diversity, inclusion, and overcoming adversity. Sarah initially feels overwhelmed by the sudden surge of public interest. She's accustomed to speaking at industry events and leading boardroom discussions, but addressing global audiences about personal experiences is uncharted territory. Still, she embraces the opportunity, knowing that her voice can inspire change. At one such event, a Women in Tech Summit in Berlin, she delivers a keynote speech titled, "Rising Above: Turning Challenges into Opportunities." Standing confidently on stage, she recounts the details of her encounter with Mark, emphasizing the importance of staying composed and using difficult moments as stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. "I could have let his words break me," Sarah tells the audience, her tone firm yet compassionate. "But I chose instead to rise above them, to show him and everyone watching that my worth isn't defined by someone else's opinion. That choice gave me power, not just over the situation, but over myself." The crowd erupts in applause, many attendees rising to their feet in admiration. Afterward, Sarah spends hours engaging with participants, answering questions and sharing advice. One young woman, visibly moved, approaches her with tears in her eyes. "I've been told so many times that I don't belong in engineering because of my background," she confesses. "Hearing your story makes me believe I can push through anyway." Sarah hugs her warmly, encouraging her to keep fighting for her dreams. These interactions fuel her determination to create lasting impact, solidifying her resolve to expand initiatives like Skybound Futures even further. While Sarah thrives in the wake of newfound opportunities, Mark Thompson finds himself spiraling downward. His termination from the airline marks the beginning of a series of devastating losses. Without a job or license, he struggles to secure employment in aviation, an industry where reputations matter deeply. Airlines, hesitant to associate themselves with controversy, reject his applications outright, leaving him financially strained and emotionally drained. Friends and colleagues who once admired his achievements now distance themselves, unwilling to be tainted by association. Mark retreats into isolation, spending most days holed up in his small apartment, replaying the events of the flight in his mind. At first, he clings to anger, blaming Sarah for ruining his career. He convinces himself that if she hadn't spoken out, if she'd simply stayed quiet, he'd still be flying planes and commanding respect. But as weeks pass, cracks begin to form in his self-righteous narrative. Late at night, lying awake, in bed he recalls the expressions on passengers' faces during the altercation, the disapproval, the pity, the outright disgust. For the first time, he starts questioning whether his behavior truly crossed a line. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Mark stumbles upon a video compilation highlighting reactions to the incident. Clips of Sarah's calm responses contrast sharply with footage of his own defensive outbursts. Watching it all unfold again forces him to confront an uncomfortable truth. He had acted out of arrogance, not confidence. The realization hits him hard, shaking the foundation of his identity. Who was he really, if not the competent, respected pilot he'd always believed himself to be? Stripped of his title and authority, he feels hollow, unsure of how or whether he can rebuild his life. Desperate for guidance, Mark reaches out to an old mentor, Captain Robert Hayes, a retired pilot known for his wisdom and integrity. Reluctantly, agreeing to meet, Robert listens patiently as Mark unloads his frustrations. When he finishes, Robert leans back in his chair, studying Mark thoughtfully before speaking. "You dug this hole yourself, son," he says bluntly. "The question now is whether you're willing to climb out of it. That means owning your mistakes, apologizing sincerely, and working twice as hard to prove you've changed." Though painful to hear, Robert's words strike a chord. For the first time, Mark acknowledges the gravity of his actions, not just toward Sarah, but toward countless others he may have dismissed or demeaned throughout his career. It's a sobering realization, but it sparks a flicker of hope within him. Perhaps redemption isn't entirely out of reach. Back in London, Sarah continues expanding Skybound Futures, partnering with schools, universities, and organizations to provide scholarships, internships, and networking opportunities for underrepresented groups in STEM fields. Her efforts attract the attention of major corporations eager to support diversity initiatives, resulting in significant funding and resources. One partnership with a leading aerospace company allows her team to develop cutting-edge training modules designed to prepare young professionals for careers in aviation technology. Despite her success, Sarah remains grounded, prioritizing authenticity over accolades. During a visit to a local high school, she shares her journey with students, encouraging them to embrace challenges and pursue their passions fearlessly. "Failure isn't the end," she tells them. "It's part of the process. Every setback teaches you something valuable if you're willing to learn." Her message resonates deeply, particularly with a shy teenager named Aisha, who dreams of becoming an aerospace engineer despite facing skepticism from peers and teachers. Inspired by Sarah's story, Aisha begins attending coding workshops and joining robotics clubs, slowly building the skills and confidence needed to achieve her goals. When Sarah learns about Aisha's progress months later, she beams with pride, knowing she's helped plant seeds that will grow into something extraordinary. Meanwhile, Mark embarks on a tentative path toward redemption. Following Robert's advice, he drafts a heartfelt letter addressed to Sarah, apologizing for his behavior and acknowledging the harm he caused. Though uncertain whether she'll respond or even read it, he sends the email anyway, hoping it might serve as a small step toward healing. To his surprise, Sarah replies promptly, expressing appreciation for his apology, while gently reminding him that accountability requires consistent action, not just words. Encouraged by her response, Mark begins volunteering at community centers, teaching children basic principles of aviation and mentoring aspiring pilots. Though humbling, these experiences reignite his passion for flight in ways he hadn't anticipated. Working with kids reminds him why he fell in love with aviation in the first place: the wonder of soaring through the skies, the thrill of discovery, and the joy of sharing knowledge with others. Over time, Mark's reputation begins to shift. While some remain skeptical of his motives, others recognize his genuine efforts to change. Slowly but surely, he rebuilds trust, proving that growth is possible even after monumental failures. Though he knows full well he may never regain the prestige he once held, he finds solace in contributing meaningfully to the next generation of aviators. As months pass, both Sarah and Mark continue navigating their respective journeys, each shaped profoundly by the events of that fateful flight. For Sarah, the experience reinforces her belief in the power of resilience and advocacy. For Mark, it serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked ego and the transformative potential of humility. Their stories intersect briefly when Mark attends a virtual panel hosted by Skybound Futures, where he openly discusses his past mistakes and lessons learned. Though nervous, he receives a standing ovation from participants, signaling a collective willingness to forgive and move forward together. In the end, neither Sarah nor Mark emerges unchanged. The confrontation aboard the plane wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a catalyst for reflection, growth, and ultimately, transformation. And though their paths diverge significantly, both carry its lessons with them, reminders that every challenge presents an opportunity to rise higher, no matter how turbulent the journey may seem. Months after the incident on the flight, Sarah Johnson finds herself at a crossroads. The whirlwind of attention and opportunities has begun to settle, giving her space to reflect on everything that's happened. While she's proud of the strides she's made with Skybound Futures and the positive impact it's had on countless lives, she can't shake the feeling that there's still more work to be done. Her journey has taught her that progress isn't linear. It's messy, unpredictable, and often requires stepping out of one's comfort zone. One afternoon, as Sarah sits in her London office overlooking the Thames, she receives an unexpected email. It's from Mark Thompson. The subject line reads simply, "Thank you." Curious, she opens the message to find a short but sincere note expressing gratitude for her earlier response to his apology. In the email, Mark writes about the changes he's made since their encounter, how volunteering and mentoring have helped him reconnect with his love for aviation while teaching him humility. He ends by asking if they could meet in person so he can personally thank her. Sarah hesitates before replying. Part of her feels uneasy about meeting Mark face to face, fearing it might reopen old wounds. But another part recognizes the importance of closure for both of them. After consulting with close friends and colleagues, she agrees, setting up a neutral meeting place, a quiet cafe near Hyde Park. The day of the meeting arrives, and Sarah steps into the cozy cafe with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. She spots Mark immediately. He looks different from the arrogant pilot she once encountered. His posture is less rigid, his expression softer, almost vulnerable. As she approaches, he stands up nervously, extending his hand. "Sarah," he says quietly, "thank you for agreeing to see me." They sit down across from each other, the air thick with unspoken tension. For a few moments, neither speaks, unsure how to begin. Finally, Mark breaks the silence. "I owe you an apology, not just for what happened on the plane, but for the way I've treated people throughout my career. I was blind to my own arrogance, and it cost me dearly. Meeting you, well, it forced me to take a hard look at myself." Sarah listens intently, her expression unreadable. When Mark finishes, she takes a deep breath and responds calmly. "It couldn't have been easy to admit all of that. I appreciate your honesty. But words alone aren't enough. You need to keep proving through actions that you've changed. That's what truly matters." Mark nods earnestly, visibly relieved that she hasn't dismissed him outright. They spend the next hour talking openly, sharing insights about their respective journeys. Sarah explains how the incident inspired her to double down on advocacy work, emphasizing the importance of representation and allyship. Mark listens attentively, occasionally interjecting with questions or reflections on his own experiences. By the end of their conversation, some of the initial awkwardness between them dissipates, replaced by mutual respect. Before leaving, Mark thanks Sarah again, promising to continue learning and growing. As he walks away, Sarah watches him go, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. Their meeting may not erase the past, but it marks a step toward healing, for both of them. In the weeks following their encounter, Sarah reflects deeply on the concept of forgiveness. She realizes that holding on to anger would only weigh her down, preventing her from focusing on the future she wants to build. Letting go doesn't mean excusing bad behavior. Rather, it means choosing to prioritize peace over resentment. This realization strengthens her resolve to focus on empowering others, particularly those who face systemic barriers in industries like aviation and technology. Her renewed commitment leads to exciting developments for Skybound Futures. The program expands globally, partnering with organizations in Africa, Asia, and South America to provide resources and mentorship to underserved communities. One such initiative involves collaborating with local schools to introduce students to STEM fields through hands-on workshops and virtual reality simulations. These efforts yield remarkable results, inspiring young minds to dream bigger than ever before. One standout success story comes from Nairobi, where a teenage girl named Zawadi wins a national robotics competition after participating in one of Skybound Futures coding camps. Overjoyed, Zawadi sends Sarah a heartfelt letter thanking her for believing in her potential when no one else did. Reading the letter brings tears to Sarah's eyes, reaffirming her belief in the transformative power of education and opportunity. On the other side of the world, Mark continues rebuilding his life piece by piece. Volunteering remains a cornerstone of his routine, but he also starts exploring new avenues for personal growth. Inspired by his interactions with children during mentoring sessions, he enrolls in a course to become a certified teacher. Though challenging, the process reignites his passion for learning and gives him a fresh perspective on leadership. Teaching proves to be incredibly rewarding. Mark thrives on seeing his students grasp complex concepts and develop confidence in their abilities. One student, a shy boy named Ethan, reminds him of himself at that age, eager yet insecure. Through patient encouragement, Mark helps Ethan overcome his fears, watching proudly as the boy delivers a flawless presentation on aerodynamics at a school science fair. As Mark grows into his new role, he becomes increasingly aware of the ripple effects of his actions. By fostering a supportive environment for his students, he hopes to break cycles of negativity and inspire them to lead with kindness and humility. Though he knows he'll never fully undo the damage caused by his past behavior, he finds solace in knowing he's contributing positively to the next generation. Meanwhile, Sarah faces a new challenge: burnout. Between managing Skybound Futures, traveling for speaking engagements, and juggling her responsibilities at Technova Solutions, she begins feeling stretched thin. Her usual energy wanes, replaced by fatigue and occasional self-doubt. Recognizing the signs, her closest friends urge her to take a break, a suggestion she initially resists, fearing it might slow momentum for her initiatives. Eventually, however, Sarah relents. She books a solo trip to Bali, seeking time to recharge and reconnect with herself. Surrounded by lush landscapes and serene beaches, she spends her days meditating, journaling, and reflecting on her goals. During this period of introspection, she gains clarity about what truly matters: balance, purpose, and meaningful connections. Returning home refreshed, Sarah implements changes to ensure she maintains equilibrium moving forward. She delegates tasks more effectively, sets boundaries around her availability, and prioritizes self-care without guilt. These adjustments allow her to approach her work with renewed vigor, reminding her why she started this journey in the first place. As months pass, the paths of Sarah and Mark intersect once more, this time indirectly. A documentary filmmaker approaches Sarah, proposing a project highlighting stories of resilience and redemption in high-stakes industries. Intrigued, Sarah agrees to participate, sharing her experiences candidly. During filming, the director suggests including perspectives from individuals who've undergone significant personal growth, citing Mark as a potential candidate. Though hesitant at first, Sarah ultimately supports the idea, recognizing its potential to spark important conversations about accountability and transformation. When approached, Mark agrees to share his story, acknowledging that transparency is key to earning trust. The resulting documentary, titled Above the Clouds, premieres to widespread acclaim, sparking discussions about overcoming adversity and fostering inclusivity in professional spaces. For Sarah, the film serves as a powerful reminder of the interconnectedness of human experiences. For Mark, it represents a chance to rewrite his narrative, not as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the possibility of change. Together, their stories inspire audiences worldwide, proving that even the most turbulent journeys can lead to brighter horizons. By year's end, Sarah and Mark stand transformed, not just individually but collectively. Their shared history, though fraught with conflict, has evolved into something far greater, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring capacity for growth. As they look toward the future, both understand that true strength lies not in perfection, but in the courage to rise above challenges and help others do the same. The months following the release of Above the Clouds bring profound changes for both Sarah Johnson and Mark Thompson. The documentary, hailed as a groundbreaking exploration of resilience and redemption, resonates deeply with global audiences. Viewers are moved not only by Sarah's unwavering strength, but also by Mark's raw honesty about his mistakes and efforts to change. Social media platforms buzz with discussions about accountability, forgiveness, and the importance of creating inclusive environments in every industry. For Sarah, the film becomes more than just a personal milestone. It solidifies her role as a catalyst for systemic change. Invitations flood in from organizations, governments, and educational institutions, eager to collaborate on initiatives aimed at fostering diversity and equity. One such partnership emerges with the United Nations Global Education Coalition, which invites Sarah to spearhead a program designed to empower underrepresented groups in STEM fields worldwide, dubbed Wings of Change. The initiative focuses on providing scholarships, mentorship, and access to cutting-edge resources for young innovators from marginalized communities. Sarah throws herself into the project with characteristic passion, traveling extensively to meet with stakeholders and assess needs on the ground. In Nairobi, she reunites with Zawadi, the teenage robotics champion whose success inspired countless others. Now a college student studying aerospace engineering, Zawadi credits Sarah for helping her believe in her potential. Their reunion is emotional, with Zawadi presenting Sarah with a handmade model airplane, a symbol of dreams taking flight. Holding the delicate craft, Sarah feels a surge of gratitude, knowing her work has touched lives in ways she never imagined. Back home in London, Sarah continues expanding Skybound Futures, ensuring its impact reaches even the most remote corners of the globe. She introduces virtual reality modules that simulate real-world aviation scenarios, allowing students without access to expensive equipment to gain hands-on experience. These innovations earn widespread praise, cementing Sarah's reputation as a visionary leader committed to breaking down barriers. Meanwhile, Mark Thompson embarks on a new chapter of his life, one defined not by regret, but by purpose. Teaching remains central to his journey, but he also begins writing, a long-held dream he'd abandoned years ago. Drawing inspiration from his experiences, he pens a memoir titled Grounded, A Journey Toward Redemption. The book chronicles his fall from grace, his struggles with self-reflection, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Vulnerable yet hopeful, it strikes a chord with readers grappling with their own failures and aspirations. The memoir's success catches Mark off guard. Book signings and speaking engagements follow, giving him a platform to share his story with larger audiences. At each event, he emphasizes the transformative power of humility and accountability. "I'm not here to tell you I've got everything figured out," he admits during one talk. But I am here to say that no matter how far you fall, there's always a chance to rise again, if you're willing to do the hard work. Mark's transformation inspires many, including some former critics who doubted his sincerity. Slowly, but surely, he rebuilds trust within the aviation community, earning invitations to participate in panels and workshops focused on improving workplace culture. Though he'll likely never pilot a commercial flight again, he finds fulfillment in mentoring aspiring pilots and advocating for inclusivity in the industry. One particularly meaningful moment comes when he receives a letter from Ethan, the shy boy he once mentored. Now a high school senior, Ethan writes to thank Mark for believing in him and announces his acceptance into a prestigious aviation academy. Enclosed with the letter is a photograph of Ethan standing proudly beside a small plane, the first step toward achieving his dream of becoming a pilot. Reading the note, Mark feels an overwhelming sense of pride, not just for Ethan, but for the positive influence he's finally able to exert. As the years pass, Sarah and Mark remain connected through occasional updates and mutual acquaintances. While their relationship isn't close, they share a quiet understanding born of shared history and growth. Both recognize that their paths, though vastly different, intersected at a pivotal moment, one that shaped the trajectories of their lives in unexpected ways. Sarah, now in her late 30s, reflects on how much she's accomplished since that fateful flight. From launching Skybound Futures to partnering with global organizations, she's made strides toward creating a more equitable future. Yet she remains grounded, reminding herself daily that true leadership lies in service to others. Her personal life flourishes as well. She marries James Carter, the airline CEO who supported her after the incident, and together they adopt 2 children, instilling in them values of empathy, resilience, and curiosity. Mark, too, finds contentment in his newfound identity. Though he'll always carry the weight of his past actions, he embraces the opportunities he has to make amends. He remarries, finding love with a woman named Lisa, a teacher who shares his passion for education and community building. Together, they open a nonprofit center offering free tutoring and career guidance to underserved youth. Watching these young people thrive fills Mark with a joy he hadn't known was possible. Years later, Sarah finds herself seated in another first-class cabin, this time en route to Dubai for a global tech summit. As the plane ascends into the clouds, she gazes out the window, reflecting on how far she's come. Beside her sits a young girl traveling alone, wide-eyed and curious. Sensing an opportunity, Sarah strikes up a conversation, encouraging the child to dream big and embrace challenges. Though the memory of her clash with Mark lingers, Sarah refuses to let bitterness define her. Instead, she channels her energy into lifting others up, proving that true strength lies not in tearing people down but in building bridges. And as the plane soars higher, Sarah smiles, knowing she's exactly where she belongs. In the sky, breaking barriers and inspiring change. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Mark watches the same sunset from his living room window, sipping tea as he reads letters from former students. Each note reminds him of the ripple effects of kindness and perseverance. Though their journeys diverged long ago, both Sarah and Mark embody the belief that every challenge presents an opportunity to rise higher, no matter how turbulent the climb may seem. In the end, their stories serve as testaments to the enduring human spirit. Through resilience, humility, and a commitment to growth, they remind us all that we have the power to shape our destinies, and in doing so, inspire others to do the same.